Shall we get started? Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name is Austin Rivers, and I'm super excited to be here today giving the first sofa talk of the H&H trade show. So thanks all for coming. We're going to be talking about something very near and dear to my gay little heart, which is Pride Month. Happy Pride, everyone. Thank you. So I'd love to see a show of hands from folks here in the audience. I'm going to stand up and walk around for a little second. So, because it's just me and 5 chairs, so I'm going to give you all a little standing bit. So how many folks here have ever been to a Pride parade? Show a raise of hands. Great, you can put your hands down. And how about folks who have been to a Pride event at work or a bar event for Pride? Keep those hands raised for any of those. Okay, great. So for any of you who have not been to a Pride event yet, you're in luck, because this is going to be our own little Pride event here for the next 30 minutes at H&H Americas. So welcome to Pride. It'll be hosted by yours truly. So speaking of me, who am I? I might give you a little background so that you understand who I am, what I'm doing here today, and why H&H has decided to choose me to talk about Pride Month. So before we get to our celebration of Pride, the LGBTQ plus community, and Craftivism, I'd love to properly introduce myself. About me. So, my name's Austin Rivers, as I said. I'm originally from Kissimmee, Florida, where I was raised with my 7 younger siblings. I was an extremely motivated and closeted gay boy up until my senior year of high school, when it came out to my family and to my friends. I was a member of too many clubs to count and was a star student in chorus, drama, and band, so much so that it led me to pursue musical theater as my career choice. I graduated high school in 2012 and had my first 2 years of college done. And I was accepted on a full-ride scholarship to NYU, where I studied musical theater with a double major in politics at the NYU Tisch School for the Arts. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2016. Immediately after graduating, I went into the field of politics, where I worked on a presidential campaign. I can assume that you probably can guess which of the 2016 presidential campaigns I worked on. I'm just going to leave that for your imagination. After we lost that election, another clue, I decided to take a break from politics and charge full speed ahead back into musical theater. For years, I worked in regional theaters, national tours, off-Broadway, and in 2 international tours. In 2018, I was cast in a Japanese tour called Disney on Classic, where I was dressed up in a tuxedo with 7 other American singers, a 60-piece Japanese orchestra, and touring Japan singing Disney music. Best job I've ever had. I highly suggest it if you're a performer. And I was on that tour for 4 months. While I was doing that tour, that's where I learned how to knit. So we were taking Shinkansen trains, which are bullet trains, and they were taking us back and forth between different cities. And I wanted to do something other than sit on my phone for those 4 hours a day when I was on, not every day, but those 4 hours when I was on the Shinkansen trains weekly. So I picked up knitting. My friend in the cast who was knitting brought me to the equivalent of a dollar store in Japan, and I got some super, super cheap bamboo needles and probably the scratchiest yarn you've ever felt in your life, and made my very first scarf, which ended up looking like a flag. I went from 40 stitches to 85. Don't know how it happened, but that was my very first creation on the Shinkansen trains in Japan. After I finished that tour in 2019, I think I'm supposed to be changing slides here, but I forgot. So I finished that tour in 2019. I enrolled at the University of Central Florida, where I got my master's degree in public administration. In the middle of my core studies, it was virtual already, and of course the global pandemic rocked our planet. I was privileged enough that my studies were already virtual, so I didn't have to switch to a virtual study. And I was completing my master's degree. I had to continue working. Theater was shut down. There was nothing else for me to do, and I live in New York City, so I had to make some money. So I transitioned to working for 2 DEI consultancies. And what I mean by that is diversity, equity, and inclusion in New York City. So we were working with for-profit organizations, nonprofit organizations, philanthropy organizations, teaching them and teaching their staff how to be more diverse, inclusive, interdependent, and working on their internal organizational culture. So I finished my master's degree in 2020 and realized that I could utilize those studies in real time to help some folks during the pandemic. I began to do some research on the LGBTQ plus community, and as you heard me mention earlier, I'm the oldest of 8, so I really have a passion for youth and for education. So I studied specifically LGBTQ plus youth, and I came across some staggering statistics. In the United States, there are upwards of 550,000 houseless and at-risk LGBTQ plus youth living in the United States. If you zoom into New York City, where I live, there are upwards of 8,000 homeless and at-risk LGBTQ plus youth. And those are just the people that we can count. We know that there's probably thousands more that we don't have a count on. And so that was the community that I realized I had to help, because it's my community on two different ends. They are LGBTQ plus folks, as I am a member of, and also there's a housing disparity where most folks who are houseless are black and brown. So both of my communities were duly affected by this housing crisis, so I decided that was who I needed to help. I couldn't create a shelter. I didn't have the resources or the connections to do so, but what I could do was knit, so I decided to create Knit the Rainbow, which is an organization based in New York City. Our mission is to collect handmade knit and crochet wear and donate it to houseless and at-risk LGBTQ plus youth who live around the nation. I'll tell you some more about that later, so don't you worry. That brings me to 2022. I'm now working full-time at a philanthropy organization as their internal DEI consultant and running Knit the Rainbow at the same time out of my apartment in New York City. So thank you all for joining me on that little tour through my life. Appreciate your attention. Thank you. I hope that story helps you to understand why I'm here talking about Pride Month and Craftivism today at H&H Americas. That's Knit the Rainbow. I forgot to change slides again. It won't be the last time I do that. So, Pride Month. In order to celebrate Pride, I think it's really important to understand the history of Pride Month in the United States. As you all probably know, Pride Month is celebrated in June, which we are in right now. So Pride was actually started to commemorate the 1969 Stonewall riots, which began on June 28th, 1969, lasted for 5 days until July 3rd, 1969. At the time, there were not many places where people could be openly LGBTQ+ in the United States or around the world, frankly. New York and most other states had laws prohibiting homosexuality in public. Additionally, private businesses and gay establishments were often raided with no warning, and they were surprised on a regular basis by police. The Stonewall Inn was a bottle bar in Greenwich Village where the club attendees had to sign their name into a book in order to enter. This was just a false illusion of exclusivity. It didn't actually mean anything for them to sign their names into the book. It quickly became an important gay establishment as it was relatively cheap to enter. It welcomed drag queens, which surprisingly, in 1969, they weren't welcomed in most gay establishments. And it was also a nightly hub for many runaways and homeless LGBTQ+ youth because you didn't have to be 21 to enter. In the early morning hours of June 28, 1969, New York City police conducted a surprise raid of the Stonewall Inn. The police were armed with a warrant and sent officers into the club. They roughed up the bar patrons and arrested 13 individuals, including employees. The police claimed they found bootlegged alcohol, and as I said, this was a bottle bar, so that meant you brought your own alcohol to the bar. So they found bootlegged alcohol, and the establishment did not have a liquor license, so that was their basis for making arrests that night. Some of the people who were arrested were charged with violating the state's gender-appropriate clothing statute, which discriminated specifically against transgender folks and drag queens. During these arrests, the transgender patrons were often violated by being taken into a bathroom and forced to prove their biological sex to the officer. So I think you can all understand what that means, by being taken into a bathroom and being forced to prove your biological sex to the present officer. The patrons at the bar and the neighborhood residents were tired of the constant police harassment and discrimination and gathered outside of the bar rather than disperse as they usually did during these raids. Police aggressively fought back the crowd. At one point, an officer hit a lesbian woman over the head and forced her into a police van. She shouted to the onlookers, "Why don't you all do something?" The crowd of harassed, brutalized bystanders began shouting, throwing pennies, bottles, cobblestones, and whatever other objects they could find at the police. The riot squad and the fire department worked to disperse the crowd, but the protests continued for 5 more days, often with thousands of onlookers coming to the protests each night. Black and brown transgender activists like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were the main instigators of rebellion and are credited today as the vanguards of queer liberation in the United States. On the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots, June 28, 1970, thousands of New Yorkers marched the streets of Manhattan from the Stonewall Inn to Central Park, which is a pretty long walk for those of you who don't know the distance between those two places in New York City. This was called the Christopher Street Liberation Day Parade, the United States' first pride parade. The official chant of that first parade was "Say it loud, gay is proud." In 1970, pride parades also took place in Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco. This began the annual celebration of Pride each June, which we still celebrate today. There are now hundreds of cities around the world and in the United States that celebrate Pride Month by hosting parades, festivals, bar crawls, drag shows, and other events at workplaces. We're going to go to the next slide now. Great. I wrote myself really great notes here, everyone. So I have a video for you from SAGE, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocacy and services for LGBTQ plus elders. They interviewed a few folks who were present during the Stonewall riots for a firsthand account.
Stonewall was a place that we could go to, be with our own people, hang out, dance, listen to music, and there wasn't too many places like that.
It was an ongoing thing that in the village, the cops would pull raids on the bars and take everybody out and put them in paddy wagons, arrest them.
Gay people had come to a position where they too wanted to be recognized.
My name is Reverend Crone Goddess Magora Kennedy, and I was involved in the uprising in Stonewall in 1969.
I'm Joe Negrelli. I'm 67 years old. I'm a real Stonewall veteran.
My name is Jay Toole. I'm 71 years old. I'm a butch, and I'm a Stonewall survivor.
We heard on the radio that the cops decided to pull one of their famous raids.
Everybody was yelling, everybody was cursing, throwing things at the cops, telling them that they needed to stop harassing us, stop arresting us.
After the first garbage can was thrown at the police, they retreated immediately back into Stonewall, and they were afraid.
This cop came toward me. As he went to pull for his gun, I went below him and came up and clammed him in the head with these 2 trash can covers.
I was lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, two-spirit, non-binary, asexual, queer, questioned, straight people. All of these different kinds of communities came together to make one big community. And that was to say, stop it.
As the word went around the country, people began to say, oh, this is something I can fight for. And as the years went on, people began to feel safer about coming out.
And again, we were fighting just to exist, and Stonewall changed all that overnight, instantaneously.
SAGE is a place where gay elders can meet with people in your age group and be their self.
When I became homeless again, they helped me get doctors, and they helped me look for housing. SAGE has actually been a lifesaver for me. I didn't have to worry about anybody saying anything to me about the way I dressed or the way I walked or the way I put myself out there.
I would like to see better treatment of transgender people because they were out there too. We had no idea that it was going to go as far as it has gone, but we've got a long way to go.
Stonewall showed that we can come together. It was for everybody.
If you don't know about SAGE, you should check them out. They're a great nonprofit organization, so check them out on Instagram and their website after this. So this is why we celebrate Pride Month today. It's not just a place to gather and have fun and drink at bars and go see drag queens, but it's also a month to remember the Stonewall Rebellion and those that fought for our rights, like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, and to continue the fight because we're not there yet. While we've made so much progress since the rebellion, the LGBTQ plus community is still marginalized, targeted in discriminatory policies and by politicians, and brutalized by police and in personal attacks. So as you celebrate Pride this month, remember the Stonewall Rebellion and the continued fight for equality. So as you're sitting here learning the history of Pride Month and the work that we still have to do to achieve justice and equity for the LGBTQ plus community, you might be wondering how you can help. Well, luckily you have your Pride Guide to tell you. So, what is activism? According to the Activist Handbook, at its most basic level, activism means any action taken to create social change. What is social change, you might be asking yourself? Social change, according to Theo Dunphy, the executive director at the Global Citizens Circle, defines social change as the way human interactions and relationships transform social and cultural institutions over time, having a profound impact on society. So I'm going to combine those two definitions for you so you can create your own definition of what an activist is. So an activist is a person who purposefully takes action through human interactions and relationships to transform cultural institutions over time. Anyone can be an activist, whether your activism is visible to those around you or not. Additionally, you don't have to be remembered in history for your activism to make a difference. You don't have to be an expert, and you don't have to practice your activism on a daily basis. You just have to be someone who wants to truly create change with other people. Who are some of your favorite activists? So we have some audience participation now. If you can think of an activist, either currently alive or in the past, who had a cause that you really care about, who are some activists you all can think of? Go ahead and name some out for me. Jane Fonda, absolutely. Amen. Martin Luther King Jr. What was that? Yes, Cesar Chavez. Any others? What was that? One more time? Bear Grusson. So there are so many different activists and causes that we can think about. Lost myself here. On the next slide, that's why. So, as you can see, there are many activists and people that the causes that people are passionate about. Whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, racial justice, climate justice, women's rights, disability rights, veterans' rights, or something else, activists are creating change minute by minute, and you can be part of that if you want to be. However, activism isn't easy, don't get me wrong. Public opinion is often indicative of a negative connotation around the word activist. There are a lot of negative stereotypes, images of activists as angry and illogical and emotional. That doesn't describe me or most of the activists that I know. The ones that I know are passionate, hardworking, and kind, even when faced with adversity, as they often are. So now that we have an understanding of what activism is, there are a few things that activism is not. So let's zoom back in specifically to talk about the LGBTQ plus community and advocacy and activism for that community. Have any of you heard the word pinkwashing? Okay. How about the word rainbow capitalism? Absolutely. So these terms mean similar things, but they have slightly different contexts, so I'll walk you through those. So pinkwashing is the act of promoting LGBTQ plus rights as evidence of liberalism. The person or the business doing the pinkwashing will often benefit in some way, shape, or form from the appearance of support for the LGBTQ plus community, while in actuality, they do not promote LGBTQ plus rights or sometimes actively promote anti-LGBTQ plus rights or policies or politicians when they're not pinkwashing. A version of pinkwashing that often happens in the US during Pride Month, as I'm sure you've all heard, is rainbow capitalism. So this often looks like brands or corporations and businesses putting out Pride merchandise, changing their logos to the rainbow, or creating ads that include LGBTQ plus people during Pride Month. Now listen, I'm not arguing that this does not mean a gesture of support. It does warm my heart to see rainbows and pride flags everywhere during Pride Month. However, it does bring about the question, what are these corporations doing to support the LGBTQ plus community year-round and to affect change for that community? It doesn't mean that every business that shows their support is practicing rainbow capitalism. Pride Month, but it does mean that individuals and businesses can choose to advocate support, not just during Pride Month. There are many companies that do that. They support the LGBT community year-round. They partner with nonprofits. They donate proceeds. They show ads year-round that support LGBTQ plus people and show LGBTQ plus people. And they support LGBTQ plus positive candidates and policies. Pride Month should be a month where individuals and businesses can highlight their activism, not contain their activism. So to close out this section, I want to give you a tool to avoid pinkwashing or rainbow capitalism. So you can ask yourself these 4 questions when you're considering purchasing Pride gear from a corporation or running a Pride campaign at your own business. Number 1, do profits go directly to the LGBTQ plus community? Whether it's through a fundraiser, whether it's through proceeds from a sale, are their profits going directly to the LGBTQ plus community in some shape or form? Number 2, are LGBTQ plus people involved in the creation and promotion of the advertisement or the campaign? Are there people on the staff, on the inside, who are working to actually create the campaign, who are in the LGBTQ plus community? Number 3, is there any LGBTQ plus inclusion outside of June? Is this company taking efforts outside of the month of June to work with and for the LGBTQ plus community and promote policies and activism? And number 4, does the organization have an LGBTQ plus inclusive internal culture? And that one's really important, and it's often harder to find out. You have to do some research and some digging to understand, do the people who work inside the company feel like they can be their true selves, their authentic selves while they're at work? So I invite you to think about these 4 questions anytime you make a Pride purchase, anytime you're making a Pride campaign, or considering donating to an organization. So at this point, you're probably wondering what all this has to do with you and me and HH Americas. So how can you leave this space with a tool to effectively make change with all of the things that we're here doing today and tomorrow at H&H Americas? And that answer lies in a term created by Betsy Greer in 2003, Craftivism. How many people have heard that term before? Probably most of you. Great. So just to get you right down to the definition of Craftivism, because we know that we want to be truthful in definitions, Craftivism is a method of effecting change that is centered on practices of craft. Typically refers to handicraft, which a lot of you are doing right now, knitting, crocheting, weaving, hand dyeing, needlepoint, sewing, and a lot more. Throughout history, crafters have used their skills to effect change and provide for communities in need. For example, crafting was used in the women's suffragist movement and the abolition of slavery. Crafting has been used to make murals and billboards, to create clothing for protection from the elements, to create symbols of mutual support, as you can see behind me, and to build entire economies. How many of you have ever used crafting skills as a form of activism here today? Great. Love that. Thank you. Whether it's donating your creations to a nonprofit, or being part of a yarn bomb, or crafting pieces of a large mural, all of you can consider yourself craftivists if you've done any of those things or a number of other things. There are so many great individuals and organizations out there who are promoting and practicing craftivism. So if you know of a person or organization, here's the next part of the audience participation. Shout out a few places who you know are doing craftivism. Parker Avenue, yes, absolutely. Knit the Rainbow, yes. What was that? Absolutely, Social Justice Sewing Academy. So there are a bunch of others as well, so I'll name a few for you. There's Soap Sack, Hat Not Hate, Knit a Square, Made for Aid, the Preemie Project, Snuggles Project, Binky Patrol, Crafting for Change, and so many more. There are also a lot of crafting companies, small businesses, and local yarn shops that practice craftivism on a daily basis. So the Craftivist Collective released a Craftivist Manifesto, which provides a 10-step guide for craftivists. I'm going to highlight just a few of those steps for you today. Number 1, be the tortoise. Take it slow. Craftivism is taking a thoughtful approach to mindful activism. Number 2, craft is our tool. It can bring about effective long-term change, but it should always fit seemingly with what we're saying, never used for the sake of it. Number 3, solidarity, not sympathy. Preserve the dignity of others by showing solidarity with them in your craft. Activism is not just about charity. Number 4, find comfort in contemplation. Use the slow nature of craft to help you consider the complexities of the injustices you're fighting for. Number 5, small and beautiful. However small, inspired pieces of beauty and love can be grateful reminders, powerful reminders of just how gorgeous the world can be. And number 6, make the change you wish to see. So, hopefully I've inspired you all, if you are not already practicing craftivism, to now practice craftivism. And if you don't have an organization to do so, I'm here to give you one, Knit the Rainbow. So for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about the organization I started in 2020, Knit the Rainbow. And I'm going to put these down because I know how to talk about Knit the Rainbow. I've been doing it for 2 years. So Knit the Rainbow is a nonprofit that I started in 2020, as I said. And again, our mission is to collect handmade, knit, and crochet winter garments and distribute them to houseless and at-risk LGBTQ plus youth. We started in New York City. This year we're expanding to Chicago, which is why we're here at H&H Americas talking to all of you. We've collected over 7,500 garments since our founding 2 years ago. And we've distributed those garments to the LGBTQ plus youth in New York City through 12 community partnerships we've made with nonprofits and shelters that serve that community. I was featured on New York One Spectrum News during their Pride special in 2021. I was also invited to interview on the Kelly Clarkson show this past January, which was super cool. Kelly Clarkson's a great person, and she's super nice and humble in person. So our main program, as I said, is garment collection and distribution. So what this looks like is volunteers around the country and the world, from 35 different states and 3 countries so far, are sending us garments to my apartment in New York City, And if any of you have ever lived in New York City, you probably understand the apartments are not quite large. Half of my apartment basically is taken up by the donations that we receive every year for these kids. And we distribute them through our community partnerships. So we have partnerships with organizations like the Hedrick Martin Institute, the Ali Forney Center, New Alternatives, and so many other organizations that are serving these youth. And now we're expanding that here to Chicago. We have a couple other programs as well. We have the Community Outreach Program, which is where we are investing in the community, both the fiber arts community and the LGBTQ plus community. We are going in and teaching knit and crochet classes. We haven't started that yet, but this fall we're going to be kicking that program off. So if you're interested in being a teacher for that, please reach out to us. We also have our pattern design program, and that is where we work with designers who want to create patterns for us to use for our volunteers. For me personally, I know that finding a pattern is one of the hardest parts about crafting because there are so many patterns out there. So I want to provide a space for our volunteers to be able to find quick patterns that are usable for the stuff that we're trying to give. Knit the Future is where I bring my DEI job into Knit the Rainbow. So that is a program where we host 3 to 4 times a year panel discussions with diverse groups of crafters to talk about what it means to be a diverse crafter. So for example, during the past 2 Black History Months, we've had a Black History Month panel with 4 to 5 Black crafters talking about what it means to be a Black crafter in the industry today. Because like I said, we're still not there yet. Lastly, Educating the Masses, which is a social media campaign where we partner with other nonprofits, other businesses, other organizations to spread the word about this housing crisis that the youth are facing. So what's next for KTR? Have so many big dreams from Knit the Rainbow, and it's hard to contain them and find the one step at a time motion that we're doing. We're hoping to get a flagship office in New York City. We currently operate, like I said, out of our apartment. So we're going to hopefully get an office one day soon. We want to serve LGBTQ plus youth around the nation. We started in New York City, we're expanding to Chicago. We want to slowly build other partnerships with local yarn shops that will allow us to expand to different areas of the United States where there are cold cities like Seattle, Boston, Detroit. Yes, name some more cold cities for me. What do we got? Yes, Indianapolis, St. Louis. There are so many other cold cities that we could serve that have hubs of homeless LGBTQ plus youth. And then one day in the far future, maybe Knit the Rainbow will also be a shelter. Maybe we'll be able to offer job readiness and mental health services and sexual health services. The sky's the limit for what Knit the Rainbow can do, and we can't do it without your help. How to get involved, the most important part. So you can head to our website at www.knittherainbow.org or follow us on social media at KnitTheRainbow Inc. on Instagram or Facebook, and then at Knit Rainbow on Twitter. And of course, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so this is my favorite part, asking for money. We do rely on public donations from individuals and corporations for our work to move forward. So for us to get an office, for us to expand to the other locations, we do need support from individuals and corporations. And lastly, we have an online store where you can get this lovely merchandise that I'm wearing and so much more. And I made a special promo code for all of you here today. It is HH Americas 2022, all lowercase, for 15% off on our store up until July 15th. So check that out too. Now I'm done with the asking y'all for stuff part. Thank you all so much for allowing me the space to talk about me and Pride Month and craftivism and activism and how you can get involved. I hope that I've inspired you to continue getting involved and continue the great work of craftivism and activism and avoiding those pitfalls of rainbow capitalism. Remember those 4 questions. Thank you.